Just file for divorce. I don't want the kids." With those harsh words, my husband left the house, abandoning our 3-year-old twins and our newborn daughter. I had suspected he was cheating for some time, but between childcare and work, I had no energy to confront him. "I can't do this anymore." Just then, one of the twins clung to me, saying, "Mommy, we love you." Their worried faces looked up at me. Despite my anger towards my husband, something snapped in me at that moment. Well, I'll just file it, I thought. I signed the divorce papers with a smirk. He doesn't realize how much I've been supporting him. Unknowingly, he had begun his descent into hell. "I'll be home late again." How many times have I heard that? My name is Iris. I'm 34. We got married 4 years ago. He was 2 years younger, which led me to spoil him at first. The following year, we had twin girls, and 3 years later, another daughter. His return home began to get extremely late around the time our last child was born. I hope the third one is a boy. I've always dreamed of playing catch with him. He was excited during the pregnancy, but his attitude soured as soon as he found out it was another girl. At the hospital, he grimaced upon seeing our newborn daughter. "She doesn't look like me. She's not cute." Intense anger welled up inside me. How can you say your own child isn't cute? Maybe he was already considering divorce by then. Even after I came home from the hospital, his sulkiness continued. He barely helped with childcare. Show a little interest in the kids. If you're short on hands, hire a babysitter or something. You've got savings from your job. I worked at a top-tier company, earning significantly more than most women my age. On the other hand, my husband struggled to keep a job, often quitting before I even noticed. Perhaps he was envious that I was more successful at work. At the time, he was also doing temporary work, unsure of how long it would last. I didn't expect any financial support from him, but I wished he'd at least fulfill his role as a father. Spend some time with the kids at night, at least. What a hassle. When I asked him to help, he did it reluctantly and so poorly that the girls were bored. He realized they weren't warming up to him, which he didn't like, leading to a terrible cycle. Eventually, he stopped helping with the kids altogether. "I'm tired from work. Let me rest on the weekends," he said. On weekends, he either stayed in his room or went out with someone. "I have to work this holiday. If you don't watch the kids, I have plans too. See you." My husband left without listening to me. I couldn't leave the children alone, so I often had to find a babysitter at the last minute. If this continued, it would surely destroy our marriage and harm our children. Thinking this, I decided to talk to my in-laws the next day. That's just how husbands are. A wife needs to be patient. More importantly, could you do that thing we talked about last time? My visit to my in-laws ended with them ignoring my concerns and asking for favors. My parents live far away, so it's hard to visit them. I feel guilty even calling, not knowing who to turn to. "Hey, make dinner." When I returned home in the evening, I was greeted by my husband in pajamas and a messy house. The kids, bored with their toys, instantly smiled upon seeing me. "Where have you been all this time?" "I had to stop by the in-laws for a bit." "Hurry up and make dinner. I'm starving." "If you've been home all day, couldn't you do some laundry or clean the bath?" Hearing this, my husband snorted in amusement. I decided not to do anything for someone who doesn't show gratitude. "What do you mean? I cleaned the bath yesterday, and you didn't thank me." "Didn't I say thank you?" "Not that. I mean, like, at least $100. He stretched out his hand, gesturing for money. What is he talking about? I must have looked distant, tired, and irritated. I pulled him aside to the bathroom so the kids wouldn't hear and retorted, "I am working, doing the chores, raising the kids, everything, and you have never thanked me. That's a wife's job." "Then what's your job?" "I work too." He barely earns $1,000 a month and does nothing around the house. Our argument lasted about an hour until, "Mommy, I'm hungry." My daughter's call snapped me out of it. My husband left in a huff, but I ignored him and rushed to prepare dinner. During these tense days, I discovered something: my husband is cheating. I confided in a college colleague who had divorced due to her husband's affairs, and she advised me to gather evidence immediately. To tell the truth, I had noticed my husband's affair some time ago, just before our youngest was born. I noticed a sweet fragrance on him, like perfume. When I casually asked him about it just after he got home, he broke into a sweat and started stuttering. In addition to that, he was coming home very late, talking less and less, and his attitude towards the children was changing. There were many signs, including the disappearance of intimacy, but what really convinced me was a certain event. There was a lipstick in the pocket of your jacket. It's mine. My lips get chapped. You're using Chanel's pink lipstick? Maybe it's my mom's. His evasive answer sounded like a lie. Then, as he hurriedly said, I need a bath, and stripped off his dress shirt on the way to the bathroom, I saw it. What is that? I sighed. It was clearly a hickey in a place usually covered by clothes. I was about to confront him but immediately thought better of it and decided to gather evidence first. Take your time warming up. I smiled sweetly, pretending I hadn't seen anything. The next day, I came home late from overtime. My daughters were already asleep, and the room was wrecked in silence. We need to talk. Only the dining room light was on, and there he stood, holding a piece of paper. I can't take this anymore. Let's get a divorce. What? Just file for divorce. I don't want the kids. Without waiting for my response, he handed me the divorce papers and left. Mommy. The sound of the door closing woke up the twins, who looked at me worriedly. It's okay. Sorry for waking you. Though I told my daughters it was okay, it clearly wasn't. He's reached his limit? That's my line. And what does he mean he doesn't want the kids? Mixed emotions swirled in my head, and I hadn't even noticed the tears streaming down my face. Mommy, we love you. Sensing something, the girls hugged me tightly. At that moment, I came to my senses. I can't go on like this. I can't worry these little girls. I realized that as long as I have my children, I'm happy, and this is what I should have done from the start. Well, I'll just file it. When I said this with a determined look on my face, my daughters smiled, and we all slept soundly that night. The next day, I filed the divorce papers first thing in the morning and called a certain person. Yes, please go ahead with it. It's my husband who will have trouble. The person on the phone listened to my story and took action. This was something I had considered before. If my husband betrayed me, I would end everything we had been doing. If that ruins his life, it's none of my business. 3 days later. Iris, where have you been? Waiting for me as I returned from work were my in-laws and my husband. My mother-in-law was furious, my father-in-law pale, and my husband seemed clueless, dragged along without understanding the situation. Have you been waiting at the front door all this time? That's kind of creepy. This is no time for that. What is this? My mother-in-law thrust a letter at me. It's a notice from a lawyer. I can see that much. Her face was tomato red as she raised her voice. I need to pick up my daughters, so excuse me. Ignoring them, I went inside, but my furious in-laws followed me into the living room, insisting on a discussion. Why would you suddenly send this? I don't understand. You would understand if you read the letter, wouldn't you? Using a lawyer, how cowardly. Despite being in the wrong, my MIL's outrage was something else, mixed with irritation and confusion. I was constantly thinking about how to convey my feelings. Then my husband, who seemed to understand nothing, finally spoke up. Are you upset because I divorced you? Filing some kind of complaint? My in-laws looked at him, dumbfounded. Of course, he had no idea what I had done for them all this time. Hey, I didn't hear about any divorce. Is that why this is happening? Such a useless son. What are you two so anxious for? You've ruined everything. Wait, what are we even talking about? As the conversation between them went nowhere, I watched coldly as my MIL slammed the table. Why did you divorce Iris? Well, my husband clammed up when things got uncomfortable. Since the conversation wasn't going anywhere, I decided to answer for him. He completely failed to fulfill his duties as a husband and father. There you go again. I told you that's just how men are, right? So you would forgive your husband if he had an affair? What? My MIL froze, clearly not expecting to hear that her son had been unfaithful. My husband tried to interject, but a sharp glare from me shut him up. Then, oddly, my FIL started defending his son. A man's affair is just a fling. It's not a problem. This is pointless. Please leave. All further communication will need to go through my lawyer. So what are you talking to a lawyer for now? You're agreeing to the divorce, right? My husband was confused, clueless about what was going on. Agreeing? I filed for divorce straight away. Then what is all this about? While arguing with my husband, my MIL suddenly started crying loudly. Paying $56,000 in one lump sum is impossible. What large sum? What are you talking about? Who's paying whom? Finally, the moment had come, time for my husband to regret. I proudly revealed what I had kept hidden until now. It was right after we got married 4 years ago. I was called to my in-laws' house alone, where my MIL said she had a serious matter to discuss. Nervous just because she was his mother, I was prepared to help however I could, but the words that came out of her mouth were shocking. "I need $60,000, she said out of the blue, leaving me utterly confused. As I hesitated, she bluntly asked about my salary. Unable to withstand her pressure, I admitted it was over $100,000, and her eyes lit up. Apparently, my FIL had gotten into horse racing, losing big amounts without ever winning, and had even accumulated debt. Desperate for $60,000 to cover his debts, she pleaded with me, and I couldn't say no, repeatedly insisting she would pay me back. 4 years passed, and all I got back was just $4,000. There were times when she repaid some only to borrow again. If I don't do something, I will never be able to collect the full amount. So I hired a lawyer and filed a lump sum claim for the remaining $56,000 in full. My husband's jaw dropped when he heard this, and I almost laughed. But we said we'd pay back little by little. Why suddenly in full? We're no longer family, so I thought I shouldn't hold back. Then my MIL, with a screech like a monkey, turned her fury towards my husband. "It's your fault for cheating, so you should be the one to pay it back." Huh? Why should I? We're not working anymore, and our pension won't cover it. If you want me to live in your parents' house, you'll do what I say. There was no way he could pay back $56,000 in one lump sum, especially since he was unemployed again at the time. "I'll live at Kate's place, so I won't pay. That's the name of your affair partner." As I grew increasingly absurd listening to this family quarrel, I decided it was time to deliver the final blow. "Don't think it ends with $56,000. I'm demanding $20,000 each from you and your affair partner as compensation, plus child support, of course." "What? It's only fair, leaving your children to play around? Where's the proof I cheated?" Had he forgotten so quickly about loudly declaring he'd live with Kate? Sighing, I handed him a pile of photos I had prepared for this moment. Looking at these made me sick. The photos were from his social media, showing him kissing and embracing his affair partner. Definitely a no-no, as confirmed by my lawyer. "Why do you have these?" A quick online search brought up your social media. "It's amazing you thought it wouldn't be found." My naive husband had kept posting cheerful photos in a public setting. He probably continued to use social networking sites without knowing how horrible they were. I was surprised that he was doing this, being mechanically inept. But it made it easy for me to gather evidence of his cheating. Even my in-laws were dumbfounded, gaping at him. "Please leave now. It's time to go to daycare. At least don't demand compensation from Kate. What if she runs away?" That's not my problem. With no resolution in sight, I forcefully kicked the family out. "Open this. Help me. I didn't know about the debt." I could hear my husband yelling through the door for a while. "I'm calling the police," I yelled, and the three of them shrugged and left. A year has passed since then. After paying me the compensation, the affair partner disappeared. Because of this, my ex-husband had to live at his parents' home, where they incessantly demanded he cover the $56,000. He ended up borrowing from shady lenders. While he managed to pay that off quickly, he still owes $20,000 in compensation for the affair and $500 a month in child support. Now he earns his daily wage by doing manual labor from morning to night. The interest on his debt is ballooning, and it might be impossible for him to pay it off in his lifetime. But that's none of my business. "Mommy, we're going to be late." Oops, my daughters are calling me to daycare. They're growing up so healthy and strong. That's all the happiness I need.
I'm sorry to hear that. Here's a rewritten version. In the midst of our wedding ceremony, a shocking disruption shattered the serene atmosphere. My mother-in-law, with an air of audacity, seized the microphone from my father-in-law mid-speech. Her words cut through the air like a blade. I apologized for my daughter's lack of beauty. The guests shifted uncomfortably as her declaration hung in the air, a bitter contrast to the joyous occasion. I glanced at my husband, hoping for support, only to be met with a chilling smirk. My senses reeled as I struggled to comprehend the sudden turn of events. A voice, firm and resolute, broke the stunned silence. An older gentleman rose from his seat, his actions commanding attention. "Is that all?" he demanded, his gaze piercing. Without waiting for an answer, he approached me with purpose. Recognizing him, my husband's expression betrayed a mix of surprise and fear. Before I could gather my thoughts, the man took my arm and ushered me away from the chaos. "Let's leave," he said gently, leading me through the corridors, away from the unwanted spectacle of our wedding day. A whirlwind of thoughts swept through my mind, painting a vivid picture of my life. My name is Angela, a 35-year-old woman shaped by the tumultuous currents of my past. Raised in a single-parent household after my parents divorced during my elementary school years, I became intimately acquainted with resilience and responsibility from a tender age. In my 20s, life took an unexpected turn when my mother fell ill, requiring my devoted care. Days melded into nights as I juggled the demands of work and the duties of a caregiver, my world revolving around her needs. Despite the challenges, I persevered, driven by love and duty. As the years passed, still unmarried in my 30s, fate intervened in the form of Stephen. A chance encounter at my office, where I manned the reception desk, blossomed into something more profound. Stephen, a man of kindness and understanding, saw beyond the complexities of my life and extended a hand of love. His proposal, offered despite the weight of my caregiving responsibilities, stirred a maelstrom of emotions within me. Could I dare to embrace happiness while tethered to the obligations of my past? Dope gnawed at my resolve, a relentless companion in the journey of love. Yet Stephen's unwavering support shattered the walls of my uncertainty. With tender words, he laid bare his heart, offering not just a partnership, but a promise of inclusion. "Let us be a family of 3, he proposed, a beacon of light in the darkness of my doubts. Moved by his heartfelt proposal, I made the decision to marry Stephen. However, when we shared the news with our parents, the reactions couldn't have been more contrasting. While my mother overflowed with joy, Stephen's mother, whom we'll call Ruth, responded with cutting disdain. During our first visit to Steve's home as an engaged couple, Ruth's words pierced the air like arrows. "I must be frank, I don't consider a woman from a single-parent family suitable for my son," she declared, her tone laced with contempt. As we embarked on wedding preparations, Ruth's hostility persisted, veiled in sarcasm and barbed remarks. Her comments, dripping with disdain, chipped away at my resolve. Despite her relentless jabs, I held my ground, refusing to allow her insults to go unchallenged. "I can endure your insults, but I won't tolerate you speaking ill of my mother," I asserted firmly, meeting her venomous words with unwavering strength. Yet Ruth's attacks only escalated, accusing me of using deceit to ensnare her son and casting unfounded aspersions on my family. Faced with her baseless accusations, I stood my ground, defending my honor and that of my loved ones. Though the road ahead seemed fraught with challenges, I refused to allow Ruth's bitterness to tarnish the love Stephen and I shared. With each attempt to assert myself, Ruth's venomous retorts intensified, leaving me feeling increasingly powerless. The thought of confiding in Steve crossed my mind, but I couldn't bear to burden him with unnecessary worries as we embarked on our journey into married life. Ruth's audacity reached new heights as she began to meddle in our wedding plans, even intruding upon the sacred ritual of selecting a wedding dress. Standing alongside my husband, she boldly declared her intent to choose the gown herself. Steve, oblivious to the tension, praised his mother's sense of style and eagerly supported her involvement. "I appreciate your gesture, but I want the freedom to choose a dress that resonates with me personally," I asserted gently, refusing to relinquish control over a decision so deeply personal. "I traveled all this way for you, only to be met with disappointment," my mother-in-law lamented, her words dripping with hurt. My husband's immediate defense of her, always swift to side with her, especially when she portrayed herself as the victim, stung deeply. Yet, when it came to the wedding dress, a symbol of my joy and individuality, I couldn't yield. "I understand, but I must choose my own dress. This moment is too important to compromise on," I affirmed resolutely, unwilling to sacrifice my vision for the sake of appeasing others. Despite her reluctance, my mother-in-law relented, though her resentment lingered. As the morning of the wedding dawned, her simmering animosity erupted into a shocking display of cruelty. "What a dreadful dress! And the veil? Tasteless," she scoffed upon encountering my chosen attire in the dressing room. Her words cut deep, a venomous attack on the culmination of my dreams. Despite my rising distress, I endeavored to maintain composure, determined to sidestep any turmoil on my special day. My mother, who adores sewing, crafted this veil with love. We selected the dress together, and I truly adore it, I explained evenly, hoping to diffuse the tension. But my attempt at peace was shattered as my mother-in-law's eyes widened with fury. In an instant, her calm facade crumbled, replaced by a storm of rage. With a sudden motion, she produced a can of coffee from her purse, unleashing its contents onto my beloved dress. Shock paralyzed me as the dark liquid stained the pristine fabric, rendering it unsalvageable. Desperation gripped me as I reached for a nearby towel, but my efforts proved futile against the irreversible damage. "This is the consequence of disobedience," she spat, her voice dripping with malice. With a final decree, she declared my attire unfit for the occasion, leaving me with no choice but to comply with her demands. As she exited the dressing room, her vindictive act hung heavy in the air, a bitter reminder of the power she wielded over my happiness. She must have deliberately brought the canned coffee, plotting to ruin my dress all along, evident from the fact that she had another dress prepared. Fueled by a mix of anger and frustration, I trembled with disbelief at her calculated cruelty. Seeking solace, I retreated to the separate waiting room where my husband awaited, tears streaming down my cheeks as I recounted the ordeal. "This is utterly unfair. It's going to cast a shadow over our entire wedding. What would you like me to do about it?" he snapped, his frustration palpable. Before I could finish, he cut me off, his voice rising in anger. His sudden outburst mirrored the venomous intensity of his mother's actions. Stunned by his abrupt shift in demeanor, I recoiled, taken aback by the harshness of his words. Yet just as swiftly as his anger erupted, it dissipated, replaced by a sense of remorse. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to lash out like that. I'm just feeling overwhelmed," he apologized, his agitation evident as he wiped beads of sweat from his brow. Despite his apology, a pang of guilt gnawed at me for burdening him with my troubles on such a momentous day. In an effort to diffuse the tension, I opted to lend an ear to my husband's concerns. "You seem really stressed. What's going on?" I inquired gently, hoping to offer some support. "It's a bit chaotic. The CEO of my company unexpectedly decided to attend our wedding. It's a long story, but basically he heard about our wedding from Steven's boss, who happened to meet him here at the hotel," my husband explained, his voice tinged with apprehension. "And to top it off, one of my colleagues fell ill last minute, so they invited the CEO to fill in." The coincidence was certainly striking, and I couldn't help but see the potential career implications. "It's quite the opportunity. Your skills might just earn you a promotion," I remarked, though I couldn't shake the feeling of frustration at his dismissive tone. Realizing the futility of arguing with him in his current state, I chose to withdraw from the conversation, allowing him to stew in his own thoughts. With the wedding ceremony underway, we exchanged vows atop the hotel's rooftop, the picturesque setting providing a serene backdrop to our union. As the moments passed without incident, a sense of relief washed over me, the earlier turmoil momentarily forgotten. However, the tranquility was short-lived, shattered by the impending family speeches at the reception. My mother-in-law's words cut through the air like a blade, leaving me seething with anger and indignation. Despite my father-in-law's attempts to intervene, she persisted, clutching the microphone tightly as she unleashed her vitriol for all to hear. Just as I reached my breaking point, a middle-aged man rose from his seat with determined resolve, striding purposefully towards me. "You don't deserve to endure this," he declared, his gaze fixed squarely on my mother-in-law. Without hesitation, he extended a guiding hand, leading me away from the escalating confrontation. My mother-in-law's outrage was palpable as she recoiled at the interruption to her tirade. However, her fury paled in comparison to the shock that rippled through the room as the man's identity was revealed. "Who dares to interrupt my speech?" she exclaimed, her indignation faltering as she realized the stature of the man before her. Beside her, Stephen's complexion drained of color as the truth dawned upon him. In a whirlwind of confusion, we hastily retreated from the reception hall, leaving the chaos behind. Sweating profusely and visibly flustered, Stephen struggled to regain his composure as we sought refuge in the relative privacy of the dressing room. "Why is my father here?" I gasped, the revelation sending shockwaves through my already tumultuous world. "That's correct. Stephen's company's CEO is also my biological father. The dissolution of my parents' marriage stemmed from irreconcilable differences. Their constant conflicts, exacerbated by their shared workplace, led them to part ways in the belief that it was for my well-being. Despite the divorce, they maintained sporadic contact over the years. I had grown accustomed to seeing my father several times a month, his consistent child support ensuring my needs were met as I transitioned into adulthood. Even when my mother fell ill, he remained a steadfast presence, offering support in various forms, fostering a strong bond between us. Yet the revelation of his position as Stephen's boss caught me off guard. I never knew my father was the CEO of Stephen's company, I murmured, grappling with the unexpected twists of fate. His sudden appearance at my wedding, contrary to his prior commitment to a business engagement, only added to the bewildering turn of events. "Why did you come if you had an important meeting?" I questioned, perplexed by his change in plans. "My meeting concluded earlier than anticipated. I couldn't miss the opportunity to give you this gift in person," he explained, his presence offering a glimmer of solace amidst the chaos. As I made my way to the entrance, I encountered an employee who revealed an unexpected twist. My father was the boss Stephen had mentioned. Learning of the wedding through routine preparations for a gift, my father seized the chance to attend upon discovering the vacant seat due to a last-minute cancellation. "Why didn't you tell me?" I questioned, feeling a mix of surprise and confusion at his secrecy. "After discussing with your mother, we thought it would be a delightful surprise. I never anticipated it would unfold like this," my father confessed, a tinge of sadness clouding his expression. Before I could delve deeper into the matter, the dressing room door swung open, revealing my mother-in-law's ominous presence. Her saccharine tone sent shivers down my spine as she attempted to coerce me back into the fold. The realization that she must have learned of my father's identity from her husband's revelation sent a chill through me. "Who do you think caused all of this?" "It was just a harmless joke," she declared, her attempt at levity falling flat in the face of my father's unexpected appearance. "How dare you make such a tasteless joke at my daughter's expense? It's unforgivable," my father shot back, his indignation mirroring my own. "What? So, it wasn't a jest after all? You genuinely called my daughter ugly?" My father's confrontational tone left my mother-in-law stumbling for words, her feeble attempts at evasion falling flat. In a flurry of urgency, my husband burst into the room, his hurried footsteps echoing in the tense atmosphere. He knelt before my father, seeking to atone for his mother's transgressions. "I apologize for my mother's indiscretion," he implored. "You're apologizing to the wrong person." My father's icy gaze bore down on my husband, his words laced with disappointment and reproach. "Angela, I'm sorry. My mother acted independently," my husband addressed me, his voice tinged with regret. "If that's true, then why didn't you intervene when she insulted me?" I demanded, my shock rendering me immobile. "And your father attempted to intervene," I added, incredulous. "But you seemed content to sit back and watch," I accused, my voice trembling with hurt and betrayal. "You're mistaken. My demeanor was misconstrued. Regardless, the sole responsibility lies with my mother," my husband insisted, his defense ringing hollow in the wake of his mother's egregious behavior. My husband erupted, his accusatory finger aimed squarely at his mother. "Stephen, are you turning against your own mother? We agreed to teach this insolent wife a lesson together, didn't we? Hey, enough with the unnecessary remarks. You said we needed to put this wife, who refuses to let Mama have her way with the dress, in her place. Keep quiet." My husband silenced his mother, his hand muffling her protests in a somewhat comical fashion. "Now, care to shed some light on this situation?" I prodded, my voice edged with urgency. "No, this was my mother's doing alone. It's for your own benefit, frankly." "At this point, don't you think?" My husband's response faltered as my father interjected, his probing gaze compelling him to speak. "When Angela insisted on choosing her wedding dress, my mother suggested she would become disobedient if not disciplined properly," my husband finally confessed, his tone tinged with reluctance. "What's wrong with choosing my own dress? Isn't it natural for a wife to heed her mother-in-law's wishes? If you can't even manage that, I feared you might become an obstinate wife who defies her husband in the future," my mother-in-law interjected, her words dripping with disdain. Marriage is a partnership of equals, isn't it? There's no hierarchy. If I can't control you, what's the use of marrying someone on the brink of aging? My husband's admission hung heavy in the air, shattering the illusion of love and commitment. The truth spilled forth. He hadn't chosen me out of affection for who I am, but as a convenient pawn in his game. All his declarations of caring for my mother, of wanting to forge a family together, were they all falsehoods? Of course, you had a tidy sum tucked away, didn't you? I had plans to use that to build a duplex. I envisioned you toiling away like a servant while my mother and I enjoyed our happiness. But now, it's all gone to waste. His words dripped with bitterness, revealing the depths of his deception. Once my husband unleashed his true feelings, there was no reining him in. His desire for control extended to draining our savings, a selfish act that left me reeling in disbelief. His expression shifted from assertive to shocked as he realized the gravity of his words. Wait, no, I didn't mean that. It's over. I can't have a wife who won't spend money or serve me, he stuttered, attempting to backtrack. Stop. I won't tolerate such disrespect, I declared, my resolve firm. I can't marry someone who views me as nothing more than a servant. His composure shattered, my husband paced nervously, grappling with the reality of our crumbling relationship. Then, as if struck by sudden clarity, he proposed a feeble solution. But our wedding is today. We can't call it off now, he reasoned, desperate to salvage the situation. I'll handle the guests and their gifts. Since your mother's actions led to this, you'll cover the expenses, I countered, refusing to shoulder the blame for his family's interference. You can't be serious. This breakup is your fault for overreacting to a single incident with my mom, he retorted, his words dripping with defensiveness. All the hurtful things you've said to me, they're all here, he added, pointing accusingly at me. Retrieving my smartphone from my purse, I pressed play, unleashing a barrage of hurtful words in my mother-in-law's own voice. Poor, ugly, harsh woman. Each insult echoed through the room, a damning testament to her cruelty. When did I record all this? I'm not naive, I declared, my resolve unyielding. I'll be seeking compensation for the emotional distress you've caused. I was merely trying to discipline my daughter-in-law. I've done nothing wrong, my mother-in-law protested weakly. If you won't pay willingly, I'll see you in court. Let's see if you'll repeat those words before a judge. This isn't a laughing matter. Realizing the precariousness of her position, my mother-in-law paled, her defiance crumbling. I'll also be reconsidering your position at the company, I added, turning to address my father-in-law. With this final blow, my husband's facade shattered, his resolve crumbling as he sank to his knees. I'm sorry, Angela. Please forgive me, he pleaded, his voice thick with remorse. That's right, Angela. You're already married. You can't just throw it away so easily. If we work together, we can overcome this obstacle and have a great future together, my husband and mother-in-law pleaded desperately. Shrugging off their attempts at reconciliation, I fixed them with a steely glare. Enough of your deceitful words. You're both despicable, I spat before storming out of the dressing room. Keeping true to my word, I proceeded to dissolve my engagement with Stephen and filed a lawsuit against my mother-in-law for the emotional torment she caused. The financial burden of the failed wedding fell squarely on my ex-husband's shoulders, serving as a harsh reminder of the consequences of his actions. Word of the debacle spread through his workplace, resulting in his ostracization by colleagues. Under my father's directive, he was relocated to a distant branch in Nebraska, effectively demoting him. My ex-mother-in-law faced scorn from her own relatives for sullying their family's reputation with the divorce. Meanwhile, my ex-father-in-law wasted no time in ejecting her from their home. As for me, I redirected my focus to my career, having no desire to entertain the notion of marriage again. Over time, my parents found solace and our family relationships flourished once more with occasional gatherings over dinner. Today, I lead a fulfilling and content life.
I was shocked to discover that Kenny, who hadn't even attended my mother's funeral, had unexpectedly flown abroad with $200,000. What on earth did you do with such a sum? I asked him. Do you remember that grand piano we had at home? I sold it, man, Kenny replied. Coming from a wealthy family sure had its perks. That was a fine piano. I never imagined it would fetch $200,000. It seems Kenny mistakenly thought that the grand piano at home was his. My condolences. The inheritance rights to the family estate are all mine. However, that piano was originally bought by our grandfather for my brother, and it still belongs to him. My brother, who's always loved the piano and now works as a piano teacher, left it at our family home because it was too big for his house. Given my brother's strong sense of ownership, he would be furious to know that something of his had been sold without his consent. Knowing my brother, simply compensating him won't be enough. When I told Kenny this, he hung up immediately. My name is Rachel Schneider. I'm a 45-year-old office worker. My family has a distinguished lineage that dates back to colonial times and is well known in our community. Moreover, thanks to my late father's successful business, we now own assets worth $9 million. Originally, my older brother was supposed to inherit the family estate. However, he had a girlfriend from a family that also required an heir. Desiring to marry her at all costs, he declared that he would give up all inheritance rights in exchange for not taking over the family responsibilities. This left me with the challenge of needing to find a spouse to continue the family name. Even though I had always wanted to be independent without relying on family wealth, I focused solely on my career. Before I realized it, I found myself in my mid-40s and still single. I needed to find someone, or a family line would end with me, so I took a leap of faith and attended a singles mixer. That's where I met my current husband. His name is Kenny, and he's surprisingly 10 years younger than me. Yet, at the party, he didn't pay attention to any of the younger women and came straight to me. "Are you sure you want to be with someone as old as me?" I asked him repeatedly, but Kenny looked straight into my eyes and answered, "I'm a bit shy and not very assertive. I've always been drawn to older, more grounded women." True to his words, Kenny gave off a gentle, reserved vibe. I felt that he could bring some peace to my assertive family dynamics. As our relationship progressed, there was something I had to tell him. My mother had been bedridden due to illness since last year, and I was taking turns with my sister-in-law, Catherine, to care for her. Wondering how to break the news since we were considering marriage given our age, I finally mustered the courage to tell him on our third date, and to my surprise, he gladly accepted and even proposed, expressing his willingness to help with the caregiving. His kindness deeply touched me, at least that's how I felt in the beginning. Kenny, who works as a daycare teacher, seemed genuinely committed. However, a few months into our marriage, he suddenly expressed a desire to quit his job. When I inquired about the reason, he looked remorseful and said, "Sorry, Rachel. The parents at my daycare are just too demanding, and there's a lot of complaining. I just can't handle it anymore." Understanding the challenges he faced, I would normally have encouraged him to persevere. However, with him already helping with my mom's care, I found myself unable to say a word. Adding to the complexity, I was 3 months pregnant. Wanting to get along well with Kenny for the sake of our unborn child, I adopted a lenient attitude. Unfortunately, my leniency led to regret. As I came out of the shower and attempted to enter the bedroom, I overheard Kenny whispering on the phone. The content of his call shocked me to the core. I managed to get married without her finding out I'm unemployed. She totally believed me when I told her I quit my job, when in reality, I quit like 2 years ago. It sounded like he was talking to one of his buddies, who responded, "Man, you're really something." Well, Rachel's family is pretty wealthy around here. I thought I hit the jackpot when I saw her at that dating event. But then again, given her age, I was probably the only one to approach her. The revelation left me feeling deceived. Was the gentle Kenny I knew all just an act? Despite the desire to confront him immediately, the thought of our unborn baby rendered me speechless. Discovering Kenny's true intentions shattered my confidence in our future. Today, Catherine, my brother's wife, will be taking care of my mom until 5:00 p.m., and then it's my turn. Pondering whether I should confide in someone about Kenny, that's when Catherine spoke to me, noticing my troubled expression. "Rachel, you look down. If something's troubling you, please share it with me. She's such a kind person, having taken care of her own mom for years, and she's really good with mine too." I confided in Catherine about Kenny, and she listened intently to my story. She reassured me, saying, "It's good you talked. Keeping this to yourself could have been harmful to your unborn child." I apologized for burdening her, but she responded with understanding, "No worries. Talking doesn't necessarily solve everything, but it surely lightens the load." Catherine seemed genuinely concerned, almost as if the situation were her own. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, and without waiting for a response, Kenny entered. Both of us were taken aback, but Kenny acted as if nothing was amiss and smiled, saying, "Rachel, I'm going to help with your mom's care from today. You're not in the safe period yet, so I don't want you straining yourself." Kenny was putting on the act of a gentleman in front of me, and I reluctantly agreed. When Catherine tried to offer assistance, Kenny spoke first, questioning, "I've been meaning to ask, why are you taking care of your mother-in-law in this house?" He used the same tone he used on the phone. Catherine explained the situation, but Kenny started saying horrible things to her. He accused her of trying to curry favor and insinuated that she'd be upset for not getting a piece of the inheritance if she married into money. Enraged by Kenny's harsh words, I wanted to leave the room, but Catherine signaled with her eyes not to. I reluctantly stayed quiet, watching the scene unfold. Kenny's attitude escalated, and he declared, "This family's wealth belongs to us, my wife and me, so I'll take care of my mother-in-law by myself from now on." Realizing it was pointless to say anything more, Catherine left the scene. I quietly slipped outside, feeling the weight of Catherine's hurt. I pondered how to extend my apologies to her. Meanwhile, Kenny took over the responsibility of caring for Mom entirely. Despite my offers to assist, Kenny insisted that I shouldn't intervene. He merely outlined the basics of caregiving. But his negligent approach resulted in tragic consequences. Our mother passed away. The funeral took place in a church where generations of our family found their final rest. However, Kenny disappeared from the day of Mom's passing. Despite my attempts to locate him amidst funeral preparations and arrangements, his absence perplexed relatives and neighbors alike. Catherine, tearful before the altar, apologized for entrusting Kenny with caregiving responsibilities. Approaching Catherine in her distress, I attempted to offer solace. "Catherine, please don't blame yourself. It's not your fault," I insisted. She shook her head, anguish evident in her voice. "No, Rachel, it's not your fault. But where on earth is that man? I wanted to confront him today, and he vanishes just as Mom passes away." Agreeing with Catherine's sentiments, I reflected on Kenny's frequent absences during his supposed caregiving duties. Neighbors mentioned his frequent departures from the house, casting doubt on his commitment to the task. They even noted the arrival of a large truck on one occasion. Though curious, I refrained from probing further amidst the funeral proceedings. Days passed, and Kenny remained absent. Then, unexpectedly, a call from Kenny disrupted my thoughts. "Hey, Rachel, I'm currently at a luxury hotel in Europe," he nonchalantly announced. Stunned, I demanded an explanation for his absence from Mom's funeral and his current whereabouts. Kenny's response was unexpected. "I spent $200,000. The mention of such a sum immediately triggered memories of the grand piano at our family home. "I sold it, man. It was a good one. Who would have thought it'd go for $200,000? It turned out that Kenny had sold the family's grand piano and was using the money to travel around Europe. The piano, which Mom said was a family heirloom, was indeed worth around $200,000. Apparently, the hotels Kenny booked were all quite luxurious, and he had quickly spent all the money. I never imagined Kenny would do something like this while supposed to be taking care of Mom. Our family home had tight security, but with family, it's a different story. The truck that had been at our home must have been there to transport the piano. Why on earth are you doing something so selfish? The whole family was worried about you since you weren't at the funeral." I confronted Kenny, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. "Well, you know when you have a kid, you won't have much free time anymore. You have a job, so I guess I got to be the stay-at-home dad," Kenny replied, surprising me with his nonchalant attitude. It's good that he wants to take on child rearing, but he seems intent on leeching off of me. Moreover, it appears Kenny mistakenly thought that the grand piano was mine. I explained to him that the piano originally belonged to my grandfather, who bought it for my brother. So the current owner is still my brother. Oh, is that so? You scared me there. It'll be fine if I just apologize to your brother later, right? Kenny seemed to lack any guilt about selling someone else's belongings. Well, Kenny has only met my brother at our wedding, so it's understandable he's unaware of my brother's intimidating nature. My brother works as a piano teacher, and ever since he was a child, he loved the piano. He pleaded with our grandfather to buy that specific piano, though currently there isn't space in his house for it, which is why it's at our parents' house. Yet he's still the owner. While working at a piano school, he has also expressed his wish to start his own school using that very piano. The piano means more to him than anything else. I can only imagine what kind of punishment he would impose on Kenny after hearing that it was sold without permission. By the way, my brother has a strong personality and hates dishonesty. I continued explaining. Kenny remained silent throughout. When he finds out you sold his cherished grand piano, mere compensation won't cut it. My brother's not just strong-willed, but he doesn't settle for compromises either. I pondered the kind of punishment awaiting Kenny after our tense phone call abruptly ended. With a stern warning, I knew he was probably feeling regretful, racking his brains for explanations. Without delay, I called my brother and recounted everything about the call. Needless to say, he was livid. The next day, as Kenny rushed home and entered from the front door, his eyes widened at the sight of everyone gathered in the living room. What's going on? Why is everyone here? He stammered in confusion. I had orchestrated the timing so that the whole family would be present when Kenny returned. My brother, along with his wife Catherine, fixed Kenny with a menacing glare. Kenny, I heard everything from Rachel. What were you thinking? Selling someone else's property, especially something that valuable, without consulting the family? My brother's voice was cold, cutting through the tension. Visibly nervous, Kenny tried to justify himself, claiming he was just trying to help with chores out of boredom when he stumbled upon the old grand piano. Really? That piano was special, imported by our grandfather from a top European manufacturer. Where's the money from the sale? My brother's stern expression demanded answers. As expected, my brother was playing the role of an interrogator, hoping to elicit a confession. Kenny hesitated, lost in thought, before stammering, the sale's money. Yeah, it hasn't come in yet. It was a feeble attempt at an excuse, and my brother's anger erupted. You're lying. Just how rotten are you? He thundered, his disappointment palpable. Pointing out Kenny's souvenir-laden suitcase from Europe, my brother accused, "What's with those souvenirs?" "I'm sorry, I used up all the money?" Kenny's admission silenced the room, the shock evident on everyone's faces. Spending $200,000 on an overseas trip seemed unfathomable. My brother, with controlled intensity, confronted Kenny. "I think you already know from Rachel, but that piano was mine. Now that it's gone, you're going to pay back every single penny. If you can't, I'm going to sue you for theft. You okay with that?" His words hung heavy in the air, his demeanor reminiscent of a mob boss. Kenny, clueless about the law, looked to me for help, pleading in a pitiful voice. What did he expect me to do? I had nothing to do with this. It was all his doing. When I rejected Kenny's attempt to justify selling the piano, he began saying something ridiculous. "Don't be so cold. I took care of your mom while you were pregnant. I just thought of the trip as a reward for myself after taking care of her. Let's just say we both decided to sell a piano. Since we're siblings, it won't be theft, right?" I was so dumbfounded that I couldn't close my open mouth. Catherine came to my rescue, stating firmly, "Enough is enough. Didn't you tell Rachel not to come for caregiving? You even told me you thought I was just after the inheritance and tried to drive me away. What did you say such awful things to my wife too?" Kenny admitted to his insulting behavior towards Catherine, but my brother's anger flared again. "Listen up. The reason my wife took care of Mom was because she didn't want to go to a facility. My wife had experience caring for her own mother, so she kindly agreed to do it for mine. Money is a later issue. First, apologize to my wife right here, right now. Grabbed by the collar, Kenny, with tears in his eyes, knelt down in front of Catherine, saying, "I'm so sorry, Catherine." Despite Kenny's apology, all the relatives looked at him with cold eyes. One of them shouted, "You better pay back the money from the piano sale as soon as possible. We can't have a criminal in the family. It'll tarnish the Schneider's name." Kenny, misunderstanding once again, made another odd remark saying, "Right. We can't have a criminal in the family, right, bro? So let's keep things calm. We'll save money together as a couple and pay back little by little." At Kenny's nonsensical interpretation, even my uncle was left speechless. Realizing that no matter what was said, it wouldn't resolve anything, I decided to fetch something from my room. Since the incident on the phone when Kenny was talking with a friend, I had the business card of a divorce lawyer ready. "Kenny, call this number. I want our relationship to be over. From now on, let's communicate through lawyers," I said as I thrust the card at him. His face turned pale, and Kenny exclaimed, "Why? We're about to have a baby, and yet, why are you doing this?" At that moment, I revealed what Kenny had been talking about with his friend on the phone. "Wait, you've heard that? It was just a joke. You think that excuse will fly?" I responded, "I've known from the start that you approached me for my inheritance." Everyone present gave Kenny a cold stare, realizing there was no way out. Kenny retorted with a defiant attitude, "Darn, I thought I was going to get close to $9 million after we got married. I researched how much your mother left you." The sudden change in Kenny, who had always seemed so gentle, shocked everyone. Perhaps I should have been suspicious of a man like him from the beginning. I met Kenny at a dating event, and despite being 10 years younger, I thought we married for love. But his betrayal hurt me deeply. From now on, Kenny would be a stranger to me and my brother, so naturally, he had to pay back the money from selling the grand piano. Kenny broke down, saying he couldn't do that. But with all the relatives present willing to testify against him, there was no escaping the consequences. However, I assured him that I wouldn't ask for child support. "Really? Well, at least I'm grateful for that," Kenny responded. "In return, Kenny, you'll have nothing to do with this child. This is my child alone. You can't even claim to be its father," I firmly stated, placing my hand on my belly. Upon hearing this, Kenny looked devastated and collapsed. Since the divorce, he had been living in poverty, working odd jobs. One day, my phone rang, and it was Kenny. Despite not wanting anything to do with him, he kept calling, so I reluctantly answered. "Rachel, please help me," Kenny pleaded in a pitiful voice. He explained that the buyer of the grand piano he sold wanted to return it and get a refund. When Kenny sold the piano, he had claimed it was in pristine condition. However, there was a large engraving on the back made by my brother, claiming ownership. Kenny hadn't checked the back and likely sold it through a shady dealer. Now facing the consequences, Kenny had to return $200,000 to the buyer, and with what he owed my brother, it was a substantial amount. He later tried to file for bankruptcy, but my brother and I took legal action to stop him. Now burdened with even more debt, Kenny worked day and night doing manual labor. Eventually, the grand piano was safely returned, and my brother put a strong lock on the room where it was kept, even installing a security camera. "No one's going to touch that piano until I start my piano lessons," my brother declared, unchanged from his childhood. He expressed his wish to start a piano school at our family home, so I decided to discuss sharing our mother's inheritance. Catherine, my brother's wife, had taken care of our mother, and I felt guilty about inheriting everything by myself. Thanks to my brother agreeing with my decision, it seems we'll continue to have a good relationship with his family in the future. Blessed with a long-awaited baby girl, I became a single mom, but Catherine, who is already done with her parenting, is fully supporting me. My brother said he's going to step in as a father figure for my daughter, and he's excited about it. His influence has led his 2 adult daughters, who love the piano, to become kindergarten teachers. They have also come to adore my daughter. I feel fortunate to be supported by such a warm family, and with gratitude to those around me, I intend